Have you been thinking about going on a cruise for some time and now you're starting to consider it more carefully? Will this be the time you finally take the plunge? Wait a minute, plunge might be a bad choice of words if you're going on the water. No, this is when you finally make the decision to cruise and you're going to go. How did we make the decision? Hi everyone, this is Your World and welcome to it, where I talk about my visits to some interesting places. I'm Bill Bernstein. And here's a word from someone who seems to forget that he's my assistant. Hi, this is AI Bill. I'll be popping in from time to time to help that other guy when he needs my assistance, and I'm just better looking. And to answer my earlier question, a lot of things went into our decision to first take a cruise, and once we did, we never looked back. This video is a discussion about some of the many things that you have to consider when thinking about cruising and whether it makes sense to cruise. We'll talk about cruise length, destination, cruise lines, cost, and so on as we look at some of the many options you have. Just to interrupt for a second, by subscribing you just make it easier for you to find my videos if you want to, and it helps me with YouTube. Thanks a lot. When Kim and I first compared the cost of traveling overseas either by ourselves or with a tour company to the cost of a cruise, we realized that costs were comparable. We found that costs depend on a lot of things: the cruise line, the stateroom, the destination, and so on. But on cruises, we were not in a different hotel each night, didn't have to pack or unpack, didn't have to pay for any food, and the food on the ships was often excellent. In addition to all that, on a cruise, the logistics of travel are taken care of. You don't have to decide which places are the ones you shouldn't miss, how to get from place to place, how to decide where to eat, and so on. And you get to see many different countries and sites, if that's what you choose to do, in a short time. For example, 7 days, 7 different places. Often you cruise at night. You're in bed and wake up in a different country. Nice. Or you could choose a cruise that spends more time at sea after you've thought about what that would be like. One more point. Usually, you don't have to worry about how much more you're going to spend on the cruise, as it's all been included, unless you choose to buy stuff, for example, or depending on the cruise line, sometimes certain restaurants. So cruising made sense to us and just seemed like a good choice. Now, how do you make your decision about where to go, which cruise line to choose, what to take, and when to go? There's so many cruises to choose from, and so many look really appealing. Let's suppose you want to cruise in the Mediterranean or the Caribbean, for example. In that case, you have lots of choices, as many cruise lines visit those areas. Cruise lines are generally considered to be in some basic categories: mainstream or mass market, premium, and luxury. Some add a fourth, ultra luxury. I'll talk a bit more about these, but I won't go into elaborate details about the cruises we took since I have other videos about those. My point here is only to say that taking those cruises opened our eyes, and our checkbooks of course, to how much we like cruising. Many mainstream resort-type lines such as Carnival, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian Cruise Lines, and Disney focus on more activities on board than a premium line would. The average age would be lower, and as you might expect, these lines tend to have more affordable prices and are generally more family-oriented, with entertainment such as water slides, go-kart tracks, and so on. The ships are also much larger, often carrying 5,000 or even 6,000 passengers. Cruise lines considered premium lines include ships such as those operated by Holland America, Princess, Celebrity, or Azamara. These lines cost a bit more than the mainstream cruises, although there's usually a wide variety of prices according to the type of cabin chosen. They carry a smaller number of passengers, usually in the range of 2,000 to 3,000, and might not have quite as large of an entertainment venue. Luxury lines would include some like Oceania, Windstar, and Viking. These lines operate ships that are usually a bit smaller, carrying from about 600 to about 1,000, maybe a little more. Included in the category of ultra-luxury lines are Seabourn, Silversea, and Regent Seven Seas. The pricing on these tends to be more all-inclusive, and the prices of these cruises are, perhaps obviously, a bit more. What is offered by each line in each category differs greatly. Doing these calculations can be very involved, as every cruise line offers something different. For example, Holland America has been going to Alaska longer than any other line, so that was a factor in our decision to choose that line for our cruise to Alaska, in addition to the deals that we were offered when we booked it. But we found the food on our Viking cruises was memorable enough that we missed it on other cruise lines. Our next cruise is on Oceania, which is considered another luxury line and promotes itself as having the best food at sea. We'll let you know. An example of things to consider is the type of excursions that you can take in the ports you visit. You can choose the excursions offered by the cruise line, or you can book your own. Although booking your own excursions can be less expensive, for our first cruises, we liked the idea of depending on the cruise line. We assumed that those chosen were probably good itineraries. We were guaranteed to be back in time for the sailing, and we didn't have to worry about anything. For us, this relaxation can at times be worth the added expense, but many don't agree and book their own local tours, which, in addition to being less expensive, are generally much less crowded. Here are some examples of what I meant about what is included in different lines. Oceania includes the cost of a certain number of excursions which you choose in your booking fee. On Viking, one excursion in each port is covered in the basic fee, but you don't get to choose. We chose to take other excursions rather than the free ones on our Viking cruises, so we paid for those. On Holland America, you pay for each excursion, although with certain bookings, you get a small credit. Each cruise line handles this differently, with the cost of airfare or more excursions also included in some of the ultra-luxury lines. And once you're more familiar with how things work, you can save by booking your own excursions if that's what you're comfortable with. We travel as a couple rather than a family, and that was another factor in the decisions we made as we learned more about who tends to sail on different lines. Only those over 18 can cruise on Vikings, for example, and the number of those traveling with their whole family is usually a small number on any of the premium and luxury lines. On summer cruises to Alaska, for example, there are usually many more families with children. It would make sense for you to consider a ship with the type of entertainment you'd like. One of my personal preferences, for example, is having a casino to spend a little time in at night. As I said, we thoroughly enjoyed our Viking cruises, but Viking ships don't have casinos. As we got more invested in the idea of cruising, I began to look more carefully at ships with casinos. Some people, however, do not like the casinos at all and want to avoid them. Choosing a cruise based on the destinations is probably the most common way to start. Then there's more to think about, but there are ways to make it easy on yourself. You can spend time researching the itineraries offered by different cruise lines, or you can start off with a travel agent. After taking all this into consideration, once you've decided where you want to go, looked at all the ships going there, and you've chosen your cruise, you're finally ready to book a cruise. If you did the research yourself, then do you make the booking yourself? Go through one of the large booking agencies you can easily find online, or choose a more dedicated travel agent that will work with you personally. As is the case with most decisions when making travel arrangements, the answer to this depends on how you think about travel, how much attention you want from the agent, and so on. Being able to call the cruise line and get an answer, for example, depends on the cruise line. We found a noticeable difference. Some lines are more responsive than others, and in busy times, there could be a long wait with some. All agencies should offer the same price that the cruise line is offering, but some travel agencies will offer credit that can be used for purchases on the ship and can be applied to certain charges, such as gratuities for the crew. I find that I often still end up calling the cruise line for answers to certain questions I have, as I might be able to reach them quickly. Let's talk a bit about how that payment works. This is another thing that varies widely, both by cruise line and by your location. Some cruise lines require full payment 6 months or even longer in advance, whereas for many, 4 months or even 90 days in advance is enough for the full payment. As someone who lives in the U.S., one thing that I found quite surprising is that although when booking in the U.S. your deposit and anything else you have paid is generally fully refundable, at least until some point, this is definitely not the case in the UK or many other countries. Prices can also at times vary when booking from different countries. All this is probably because of the large number of Americans who travel. If you don't have a passport, remember that almost all cruises, even though starting in the U.S., are required to stop in another country and you'll need a passport, with the exception of some to the Caribbean. It sometimes takes a very long time to get a passport or to renew a passport. Once you've made the decision to go for it and book a cruise, you'll still have some things to consider. We'll talk about all that later. The bottom line for us is that we feel we are not spending much more, if any, than we would on a land-based package when we are paying for hotel rooms, meals, and so on. If you want to learn more about the specifics of cruising, I have other videos, and there are other many great YouTube channels about cruising you can check out. If you want to take a look at some of our other cruises, AI Bill will show you the links. Hi, this is AI Bill showing you the links to some of our other videos about cruising. You can click on one of them to see it now. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Until then, so long from all of us in your world.